The Joe Rogan experience.
So here we go again. I'm gonna argue with Joe Rogan's guest, Oliver Stone, about nuclear power. I'm not against nuclear power. I just want to point out some things that Oliver Stone was saying, which is not exactly so. Or at least there is no consensus on a lot of the things that he said. It seemed to me a little bit like Oliver Stone doing advertisement for the atomic energy industry because he was so excited about it. It was a little bit weird how excited he was about this and how wrong he was getting certain things, although he did a whole documentary on this. Yeah, let's get into it.
Really glad how you covered it in this documentary about 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima. We have these ideas in our mind about the dangers of nuclear power. And I love the analogy that you made in the film about how driving a car is not scary, but it's dangerous. Flying in a plane feels scary, but it's far safer.
Yeah.
And this is a great analogy to nuclear power.
So let's talk about this analogy. I also like this analogy, but I would flip it. My problem is if there is a catastrophe with coal, with oil, with gas, it is nothing compared to an atomic catastrophe. So just with a plane, when a plane actually crashes from 36,000 feet in the air, nobody will survive. Impossible. When a car crashes, you can survive it. Also, as soon as the car stops from a crash, you can get out. If you're able to do it, or people can help you to get out. But the plane, you can't get out. It's impossible. And also when a plane crashes, it's hundreds of people are dying. When a couple of cars crash, it's, 2, 4, 5, 6, not that many. So my problem with this analogy is that, sure, plane is safer, but when the plane drops, it's way worse. Especially, let's say, it even dropped onto a city.
In the documentary, you showed the anti-nuclear movement that happened after 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
And how crazy it was. There's all these stars and celebrities, and they're doing concerts. We've got to stop nuclear power, and what a mess.
That happens when a fad, becomes fashionable. And
Yeah.
It was a very successful movement. You're talking about the negatives here, and the accidents, and we cover all that in the film, which is called Nuclear Now. And the idea that was behind it was because I really was like you. I went along with those things in the 70s and the 80s because I didn't know better. I wasn't educated. I really wanted to know, what is nuclear power? I wanted to.
So, yeah, what is nuclear power? You want to be educated, yes, but it still remains, and I think people do have a right or to be a little bit scared of it. Because nuclear power, it is a scary thing because we are trying to control such amount of force, such amount of power, that if something goes wrong, then it really goes wrong.
Go back to the source. And you got to go back to the beginning, and you got to go back to Marie Curie and Albert Einstein and World War II and all how it got developed. This nuclear energy is a beautiful, incredible, almost a miracle that was given to us.
It is a miracle that we are able to harness it, I would say. Yes. Was it given to us? I don't know, by aliens? No, we came up with it.
It's in the earth, uranium. It's everywhere. The planet, the earth, the sun. And we, in a sense, we took it like Prometheus and we kind of misinterpreted it, misused it, which is kind of normal given what we do with natural things.
Yeah, he's right with this. We keep once we get power, we keep misusing it. And not just like this kind of power, political power, any kind of power. I'm sure everybody can see it in today's world, how power gets misused all the time.
There's all configurations in the bomb that don't exist in nuclear energy. So when people see a nuclear energy plant, they subconsciously, they cross it with both war and they cross it with horror films that they've seen in the 1950s with radioactivity and monsters that come out of that. You know, a spider bites the man and he becomes Spider-Man. You know,
Hulk,
it's incredible, the stuff that happens. And Hollywood has done no favors to it. It's continued for years and years and years. And then, of course, you had 3 Mile Island. The film was coming out at the same time, China Syndrome, and with Jane Fonda. It was a good film. I enjoyed it. We all enjoyed it, but it really was hysterical and alarmist, saying and nothing happened at 3 Mile Island except the reactor did melt down, but nobody got hurt because the containment structure worked to keep it in. So there was no release of radiation. And
all right, so here's the first one where he's not completely wrong, but he's wrong, and I don't know why he's saying this. There was release of radiation. So I went into it a bit, and it was in the government reports. So fission products were released into the reactor coolant, primary coolant with fission products and or fuel was released, and ultimately ended up in the auxiliary building. The auxiliary building was outside the containment boundary. So again, he was saying everything was, contained and controlled, but no, because it was already outside of that containment boundary. No significant level of radiation was attributed to the accident outside of the facility. Although there was radiation, it's just they don't think it was significant enough. Although some independent people who measured and went out there at the time, they were saying that they think it was way higher than what the government said, perhaps as much as 100 times higher. But I don't know what the truth is. But one thing is for sure, radiation did escape because everybody was able to measure it. Everybody said it. There is lots of reports about it. According to the Rogovin report, and I will put all this information into the description, all the links to these reports and everything I'm talking about. The released radiation resulted in an average dose of 1.4 mrem to the 2 million people near the plant. In comparison, a patient receives 3.2 mrem from a chest X-ray. On average, a US resident receives an annual radiation exposure from natural sources of about 310 mrem or 0.85 mrem per day. So just one note, even in this report, it doesn't really explain anything very well. I couldn't find anything about it, but when it says patient receives 3.0 mrem from a chest X-ray, that's like a second or a couple of seconds that they get that. So that radiation, that was the average radiation that people got from this release of radiation was 1.0 mrem, but was that per hour? Was that per day? Was that per week? Was that altogether 3 or 4 months? It doesn't really say. So that's already for me a little bit fishy over there. But also 1.4 mrem, if they were getting it, let's say per day, if I add the 0.85 per day that they naturally get, that would be 3 times now the radiation that people are getting. And this radiation was measured at least 10 miles out.
They continued on. Silkwood was another one. And then, if you remember, not too long ago, there was the HBO thing, Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Which was a complete fictionalization of what happened at Chernobyl. So we went to Russia and we talked to the scientists there, and we wanted to know what happened at Chernobyl, and we find out, and it's in the film. And the same thing is true for Fukushima, which is unbelievable because when you go to the bottom of it, I was astounded to find out that nobody died there from radiation. Not one Japanese. They checked the whole thing out, and it's been done to death. But you hear about 20,000 people died from the tsunami and the earthquake, which was the biggest earthquake Japan ever had. Really, we show the earthquake, we show the tsunami. The wave was 100 feet tall. There was a badly built wall. The wall was not a seawall that could hold, and the generators were flooded beneath the water. And
these were also not state of the art.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like what they can do now in terms of these power plants.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about, very briefly I will talk about the Chernobyl one. So when the Chernobyl thing happened, so all the radiation went all the way up to Sweden. So if you guys ever look at the map and you look where Ukraine is and where Sweden is, it's a very long way, thousands of miles away. Also, it has affected people in all those countries. Cancer, babies were born with all kinds of defects. So when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong. I mean, they can't even get back to Chernobyl still. I mean, it's too radioactive around there. It's probably going to be like that for another 100 years. Now let's go to Fukushima, because he although directly yet, seems like people didn't die, but indirectly, who knows? Now, they released radioactive material into the surrounding air and water, and radioactive substances were eventually found in all of Japan's prefectures. And while there were no immediate deaths or causes of radiation sickness, more than 100,000 people were evacuated from their homes due to radiation risk. So that is not a coincidence that they would do that.
Everything gets better. I mean,
Yeah.
But even those nuclear reactors built 60, 70 years ago are still functioning. They're legacy reactors. They do work.
Yeah.
And we mustn't dismiss them. Yeah, it gets better. And technology gets better. Like as in any business, and there's another generation, and it's better, but hopefully better. But
the point was that they could avoid what happened in Fukushima today.
Fukushima was, if you look at closely, Japan had built 20-some reactors at that point, and this one is the only one. The others were exposed to the same earthquake and the same kind of tsunami. Several of them were on that same coastline, but this particular one, this plant, was the only one that was shaken up. And even then, all the radiation that was released, there was a hydrogen explosion. All that radiation released in the air, you heard about it. It was supposed to be another Chernobyl. Well, we have shots in the film showing they're taking tests on all the Japanese citizens, and nobody it's low level, what they call low level radiation, which is we can sustain it. We have DNA in our body that repairs our body as each day goes by.
But it's also, you point out very well in the film, that there's a lot of radiation that you don't even take into consideration that you encounter constantly.
Okay, so let me show you guys something about this. Oh, no big deal, a little bit of things got into the air and the water, by the way. I will show you a video of the dispersion. Okay, this is a model of the Fukushima accident. So here is Japan up in the top left corner. That is Fukushima there with that little yellow dot. So you see, the lighter the color gets, the less radiation it becomes. So as you can see, this is North America here on the right, goes over it. And this is that actually happened, this kind of dispersion into the atmosphere. As you can see, pretty much like the whole northern hemisphere was affected. As you can see, this is over several months that this happened. Now, how about the water dispersion? So this is when the water dispersion of radioactive material. Now, it's not deadly, but we don't know long-term effect really. 43 days after release. This is Japan here. This one is 367 days after release. And this here is North America. So this is the US coast all the way here. You would have California here. And then, go up to Alaska. And one more picture, and this one is 1,412 days after release. Pretty much the whole Pacific Ocean has been affected. Now they say this is nothing, but I remember when the Fukushima was, they were catching fish in Vancouver, in Canada, and I believe in the coast of America too, California, which had an elevated amount of radiation in them. And the problem with the fish is it doesn't come out of them, just like a poison. It remains and it just adds up in fish. So let's see what else I found about this. So a decade after the accident, several towns in the area remain off limits. And even in the areas that the government has deemed safe, many residents have chosen not to return. This disaster is doubling up because people are afraid or cannot return to their homes, their whole livelihoods. Indirectly, the Fukushima accident caused extreme losses in industries across Japan, including energy, tourism, agriculture, and fishing. The direct economic cost of the Fukushima accident is staggering, likely to far exceed $200 billion for cleanup and recovery, a process which is expected to take decades. Most recently, Japan has struggled with addressing radioactively contaminated wastewater. They still have contaminated wastewater, which they don't know what to do with, which is currently building up on a site storage. Japan has proposed treating the wastewater and releasing it into the Pacific, an action imposed by many neighboring countries, fishing organizations, and environmental groups. Unfortunately, there is no good choice here. Accumulation of water will overwhelm the area if stored indefinitely. Yeah, no big deal. It's fine, Fukushima is fine. Don't worry about it. Now, the FDA response to Fukushima nuclear power facility incident says FDA responded by issuing the IA detention without physical examination of products from Japan due to radionuclide contamination. The USA wanted to stop getting food from Japan. Importing could be contaminated. So now, in April of 2021, after an extensive analysis of Japan's robust control measures that include decontamination, monitoring, and enforcement, after reviewing the results of 10 years of sampling food products from Japan, after determining a very low risk to American consumers from radioactive contaminated foods imported from Japan, FDA has decided that the AI is no longer necessary to protect public health and therefore should be deactivated. So it took 10 years for the FDA to say, okay, maybe this is safe enough now to import food from Japan again. So again, the government itself, the FDA, had such a big problem with it. It is dangerous, I'm sorry. Because the danger is not that when everything is right. Problem is so much bigger when something goes wrong, because now it doesn't affect local. Let's say an oil line bursts. So what happens? Oil gets onto the ground, or let's say in the water. You can clean it up. You may have an environmental problem for a few weeks, a few months, maybe a few years, but you can clean it up, it can regenerate. But as you can see, with nuclear, when something goes wrong, it could take decades, it could take centuries for things to get back to where it's safe again. That is the problem with the nuclear, and it's people, because we are fallible, so we make mistakes.
The idea of radiation as being a net negative, it's a terrible thing, but it's just a thing. You get it from being outside, you get it from rocks, you get it from all sorts of things.
There's radiation in this room. You get radiation from eating a banana.
I think what you said is it's so true that...
Yeah, radiation is everywhere, but that doesn't mean that I want extra, because the radiation that we get from the earth, from things, from normal everyday things, we adjusted to it. We developed for that, right? But when you get extra, then your body has to handle that extra, which it may not be prepared for. It didn't evolve to be able to handle that extra. So I don't know how much that extra is, which can really cause problems to the body, because I don't think any scientist really knows that in long term.
Films and comic books and our fictions of radiation, That's part of the problem.
Yeah, that started early in the 50s.
It's a giant problem because
Comic books and all that.
it plays to the worst aspects of human nature, which is we just love to get terrified about headlines, so we don't read into the devil of the details.
He's partly right, but nuclear is so dangerous that I think people have a right to be a bit afraid of it.
Exactly. That's what was confusing to me, and we're miseducated. And there is still a bias against nuclear if you mention it to anybody.
Yeah, it's scary instantly.
And but
because nuclear is scary.
The point is we can live with it, and we have to, because we're facing a very difficult situation, a cliff that we're going to go over, and it seems that no one's really getting it. So that's why I felt like the film, I wanted to know. I need to educate myself. So in doing the film, I think I was able to bring out these things you talk about. What is wrong with nuclear energy? It can work. It is a miracle. We should use it, and we should use it abundantly. The Chinese and the Russians are way ahead of us. They've built this. They built it, and they built it with government backing, not like the U.S. where we kind of back it, but we don't really back it. So,
all right. Nuclear is a miracle. It is a miracle, but it's a dangerous miracle. And we should use it abundantly. Let's look into some of this, using it abundantly. Let's look at the cost. The high cost of constructing nuclear plants, has made it difficult for nuclear power to compete with other energy options in the United States, particularly natural gas. The high cost of nuclear power has led to a significant decline in the construction of new plants, with just one plant, Watts Bar 2, entering commercial operation in the past 20 years in the United States. Government subsidized capital costs help explain the relative vitality of the nuclear power industry in Russia and China compared with the United States. So in Russia and China, the government pays a lot of it. So in the United States, because its nuclear facilities are private enterprise, the government doesn't necessarily give any money. But if it did, it means we are footing the bill for private company to make profit. So I don't know. I mean, I don't mind if the government, we pay taxes and we use it for that to generate electricity to build up cost-effective, safe, let's say, if we can do it safely, nuclear power, but then profit should come back to people, or profit should be put back into the price of the electricity. Since the 2011 Fukushima accident in Japan, the public has become even more critical regarding the safety of nuclear power. Passive control systems and security systems for emergency situations have further increased capital costs. So in order to make it really safe, so shit don't happen, like in Fukushima, it's going to cost a lot more. But because it's private enterprise in the United States, they don't want to pay more for it. So if they start building it and trying to save on it, then we're going to have lots of Fukushimas in the United States. Because Fukushima problem was the same thing. They weren't really doing upkeep on the Fukushima plant. They didn't do things that they were supposed to do for different reasons. One of them was cost, and that's why that happened. Because on that coast where the tsunami hit, this wasn't the only power plant. There was a whole bunch. None of them were damaged because they were built right. The Fukushima wasn't, because they wanted to save money, and also there was all kinds of problems there where they told the government years before this happened that yes, everything is okay with the plant and they are upkeeping and they are modernizing whatever, but they weren't doing it.
It's almost like we have to cure ourselves of these misconceptions, and if we don't, we're screwed.
Both sides have misconceptions, it seems to me. So I think there should be a dialogue, because this, what they are doing, is not dialogue. So Joe is not pushing back at all on Oliver Stone. I think because he really likes the guy. He loves his movies and all that. He's in awe of Mr. Stone, but I think he should have pushed a little bit back and asked a bit more and prod more, because there's a lot of problems still that we haven't worked out.
So it's not 100% like one of the issues is about storage, the waste.
Yeah.
And when you talked about just the size of the amount of storage, it's not nearly as much as a lot of people think it is.
Oh, the amount of all the waste that America has used up to now since the 1958, whenever Shippingport was built, amounts to about the size of Walmart, frankly. You could put it in a Walmart. In other words, people make a big deal about waste, but they don't realize that it's so intensive an energy, huge amount of energy, that it's how do you say, compact as a result. So it fits into
Yeah, but that compact thing radiates like crazy, and its radiation can go for miles and miles and miles. He forgets to mention that. Let's look at groundwater contamination for one. Tritium is a mildly radioactive type of hydrogen that occurs both naturally and during the operation of nuclear power plants. Water containing tritium and other radioactive substances is normally released from nuclear plants under controlled, monitored conditions. The NRC recently identified several instances of unintended tritium releases, and all available information shows no threat to the public. Now, about 80% of Texans are served by water utilities reporting detectable levels of radium. And concerns have echoed across the country, from abandoned uranium mines on Navajo Nation lands to lingering nuclear waste from the Manhattan Project in Missouri. That was in World War II. It's quite a long time ago. To contaminants reaching from phosphate mines in Florida. Hirsch highlights several potential avenues for drinking water contamination related to nuclear weapons or energy development. Wind can send contamination off-site and deposit it into the soil, for example. Gravity can carry contaminants downhill, and rains can carry contamination via streams and rivers to infiltrate groundwater aquifers. While vegetation absorbs radioactive and chemical contaminants from the soil in which it grows, those pollutants are readily released into the environment during a fire. So, the 2018 Woolsey fire, which started on Santa Susana Field Laboratory property, burned 80% of its 2,850 acres. Today, more than 700,000 people live within 10 miles. Over the following 3 months of the fire, the levels of chemical and radioactive contamination running off the site exceeded state safety standards 57 times. There is one here which is 400,000 gallons of radioactive water leak from Minnesota nuclear plant. So these things keep happening.
Waste itself is a positive about nuclear because, first of all, there's been no harm done. So it's been buried in casks. And first of all, it goes into water for maybe 2-3 years. And that's a conductor that takes the radioactivity down. And then it gets put into casks that are 12 to 14 feet.
It's just fairy tale.
Build these casks in the United States. They're concrete and steel.
I mean, it's true what he's saying. That's what they are doing. It's fairy tale that this is all super and excellent and so safe.
Concrete is a great, does not conduct radioactivity. Concrete stops it. So concrete and steel casks work. They can go for 100 years.
Concrete. Yes, it stops radioactivity. But actually it needs an extra, you have to mix in something, I forgot what it is. You have to mix in another material. It stops it, but the problem is radioactivity degrades concrete. So eventually it will crumble it. And then once it crumbles, the radiation will escape. This is the problem in Chernobyl. So Chernobyl, they put a big cast over top where the accident happened, where the explosion was, of that unit in the plant. Works the same way. It's a cask, but radiation is so strong that it degrades that. So they keep having to fix it, replace it. In fact, very soon they're supposed to replace it because it's going to crumble. So with the war on now, I don't know what's going to happen because somebody has to fix that before that cask that they put on top, and I'm pretty sure it's in that series too, in the movie. If that crumbles, then radiation comes out again, and the wind will take it, and the wind will take it over to Europe again, and it's going to be a huge problem. Also, I have read before too, and I heard that some of these that he's talking about, when they put into these caskets and they bury it in mountains and all that kind of stuff, it still starts to leak eventually, and sometimes they don't do it right because they're trying to save money. They may not do it properly, and it seeps into groundwater in the mountain, which comes down. Of course, where does it go? It comes down where we live, downhill from the mountain. So all this wasting is also not solved yet. It's a big problem.
And then you can go another 100 years. And then eventually, you realize that radioactivity drops each time. In 4 or 5 years, it's way down. It drops to almost, I don't have all the figures, but you can see that it's a ridiculous fear compared to what? Given that climate change is so dangerous.
I find what is ridiculous is the rosy picture he paints here. I think that is ridiculous.
And compared to the deaths that are already occurring every year just from using the methods we have now, in comparison to the amount of people that died from nuclear, it's very, very small.
Yeah, so that was it. I don't know. I don't know a lot of the things he said, why he said it that way. It just rubs me the wrong way because it's not true. Anybody can look after it, go online. I will put a lot of information in there. That what he was saying here in the short video is not completely true. So I don't know if he was paid by the atomic industry to make this documentary and go on Joe Rogan and say how wonderful atomic energy is, which it is good, but it is not that safe and not that cheap. They keep saying because it's cheap. So about the money, cleanup of the 3 Mile Island was called TMI2. Cleanup started in 1979 and ended in 1993 with a total cost of about $1 billion, equivalent to $2 billion in 2022. TMI1 was restarted in 1985, then retired in 2019 due to operating losses. Its decommissioning is expected to be complete in 2079 at an estimated cost of $1.2 billion. So it's going to take them 60 years to decommission it. Like, who's going to pay for it? And my other problem with nobody ever talks about if there is wars, if there is big problems, if there is, let's say, a civil war in a country where they have atomic plants, just like in Ukraine right now, and if nobody is there to control it, then it will melt down. If they bomb it, it will melt down. And we can very easily have a lot of these plants melting down and poisoning everything. It could poison the whole earth fairly quickly with some pretty serious radiation. So nobody talks about that. What happens when there's war and they start bombing these places? So anyways, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And please comment below. What do you think? Do you think that atomic energy is safe? Do you think it's the way to go? Do you think it is the future? I mean, they are working on atomic energy, which is, instead of fission, it's fusion, and the fusion, it doesn't create such waste, such dangerous waste, and if something goes wrong, the radiation is much less, and it's way safer. And they are gonna start, I think, testing it in a year or two in I believe it's in France, and a lot of countries working together, EU countries, United States, Canada, a whole bunch of countries working on that. And if that is successful, then the new generation of atomic plants are going to be a fusion instead of fission, which is going to be way more safe. And then I think that would be the best. I could stand behind that wholeheartedly if it's true what the scientists said, that it is so much safer. Thank you.